Well, good morning. I was hoping to get a good morning back. Good morning. All right. I'm Catherine McGrady, President and CEO of CNA, which is proudly the home of the Center for Naval Analyses, and that is the Department of Navy's sole federally funded research and development center. I'm pleased to be moderating this panel because nearly everyone in this well-informed audience is focused on the Indo-Pacific region, and CNA is no exception to that rule. We're focused on strategic challenges in the Indo-Pacific as well as doctrinal, operational, tactical, and technical challenges in the region. And I know many of you in this room are focused on those very same critical issues. The security landscape of this region is constantly evolving. Some relatively recent developments could reshape the landscape, a sort of security metamorphosis, as one of my analysts noted. There are strategic developments, some positive and some worrisome, that should be called out as context for this panel. On the positive side of the ledger, alliances and partnerships in this theater have never been stronger. And then there's the AUKUS agreement. There's also the fact that there's a Japan-US Republic of Korea trilateral that's now in motion, and the elevation of the Quad, major strides in the US-India relationship, additional enhanced defense cooperation locations in the Philippines, and lastly, anyone following the region cannot help but take note of Japan's approach to its defense is evolving. And on this point, the US President and the Japanese Prime Minister will be meeting in 2 days' time to discuss tighter military cooperation, including changes to the US's command structure in the region. So those are the positives, but on the negative side, there's increasingly risky confrontations between Manila and Beijing in the South China Sea. There's the evolving partnership between Moscow and Pyongyang's continued missile and nuclear programs. Their near persistent presence of PLA air and naval assets in the vicinity of Taiwan, and the very real security implications of climate change, which is becoming manifest in the most vulnerable island nations in the region. Some of my analysts have recently been to Fiji and Tonga, and climate change is a very real factor for those islands. So those are some of the strategic developments that serve as context for this panel. Another important context for this panel are technological developments which could shape the military environment in the region. Advancements in areas such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, big data, unmanned systems, cyber and space systems are occurring at a rapid pace, potentially foretelling a radically different future operating environment. And while the technological advancements are necessary, they are not sufficient to provide enhanced capabilities. It is only by operationalizing these technological leaps and ensuring clear military utility that our sea services and allies can benefit from the promise of these technologies to protect our national and economic security in the region. So here too, there are positive and negative sides of the ledger. So the members of this very well qualified panel here to address both the strategic challenges in this theater as well as the developments in technology. This is a group of individuals whose portfolios are as diverse as the challenges in the theater. Our panelists are Lieutenant General James Bierman, Deputy Commandant of the Marine Corps for Plans, Policies, and Operations. Admiral Tongson, of course they have us seated out of order from my notes here. He is the US Coast Guard's Pacific Area Commander. Admiral Ruttenberg, who is the Reserve Deputy Commander at US Pacific Fleet. Admiral Carey, who's from NOAA's Office of Marine and Aviation Operations and NOAA's Deputy Director. And definitely, finally, but not last but not least, is Mr. Richard Jenkins. He's the founder and CEO at Saildrone. So the way it's gonna work today is I'm gonna start by asking one broad question, and each panelist will answer that question. And then I'm gonna ask a round of tailored questions to each panelist. And my hope is there's time for you in the audience to answer your questions. So let's get started with the first question. For all of you, What do you see as the challenges the U.S. faces in protecting its interests across the region and the progress we're making? And how are the actions your organizations are taking, how do those actions impact the calculus of our competitors? And I'm going to give you 5 minutes to answer the question. And then if you would, before you answer it, just give a brief introduction of yourself to today's audience. So General Bierman, I'm going to begin with you.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Doctor. And great to see everybody, some comrades and friends. As mentioned, I'm the Deputy Commandant for Plans, Policies, and Operations. That's a big name for OPSO of the Marine Corps. I've been in that billet for about a month and a half, and more recently in FMF Command in 3rd Marine Division and 3MEF in the Western Pacific for the last 3.5 years. So thank you for the question, Doctor. I'll start if I could, and I will answer the question with some short framing comments. The current commander of Indo-PACOM identifies 2 purposes for U.S. forces in the Pacific region. The first is to deter conflict, and the second is to be ready to fight if conflict occurs. We have a number of adversaries in the Indo-PACOM region, but I don't think it'll surprise anyone, and I'm not hesitant to say we're particularly focused on the PRC, the People's Republic of China. On a few occasions, I've heard, some of you may have also heard, Admiral Lung Aquilino, the current commander of Indo-PACOM, say that every day President Xi looks out his window, sees what U.S. and allied forces are doing, and then says, today is not a good day to do that. That's a win for us. The majority of the operational forces in the Marine Corps, 2 of our 3 Marine Expeditionary Forces, are assigned to the commander of Indo-PACOM. Many of these Marine forces are actually positioned in the first island chain, west of the international date line, and then others constantly go back and forth on exercises and operations. These 4 deployed Marine forces are in daily competition for access and influence across the Central and Western Pacific. They push, we push back. We work closely with the United States 7th and 3rd Fleets, the Joint Force, and with allies and partners. The imperative of Marine forces and U.S. forces in the first island chain in the Western Pacific is to make common cause with our many partners and to conduct ourselves in a way that sends a strong message of readiness, lethality, and capability to regional adversaries, again, especially the PRC. Everything we do in Indo-PACOM is done with an eye toward cognitive impact on potential adversaries. Much as they might like us to think so, the PRC is not 10 feet tall. That's not to say they're not worthy of respect, and we do respect them. They're working very hard. They're building lots of capacity, but they struggle with doubt and uncertainty, and we're purposely campaigning and posturing to maintain and magnify their doubt and unease. Of all the challenges, to the question on challenges, of all the challenges the United States faces in the Western Pacific, I would particularly highlight time, space, and access. To this point, Marine forces in the Western Pacific, as part of the fleet, were what's called stand-in forces. With the fleet, were already in place. Marine forces in the Western Pacific operate across the competition continuum, and within the contested area, they are the leading edge of a maritime defense in depth. So besides introducing uncertainty and disrupting adversary timelines and plans, which I alluded to earlier, one of the most crucial roles played by stand-in forces is that of setting conditions and buying time, buying decision space for the joint and combined forces to reposition and close on our terms if we get in an escalating crisis that may potentially lead to conflict. Operating with the fleet as Marines, we sense and make sense. We provide early command and control quarterbacking. We thicken existing sustainment and informational networks, and we conduct combined arms across multiple domains. And the role of those stand-in forces as a naval integrated force, it is most critical in those early phases. And these efforts are enabled and amplified by our amphibious capabilities, the ARG-MU, and our MAGTF formations. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, General. Admiral Johnson.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. All right, well, see, that was better, right?
See, they're
We're
waking up.
waking up. All right, well, thank you, Dr. McCready, for the introduction and certainly the scene setter. And I am thrilled to join you today for this panel on a topic that is certainly top of mind for me, the United States Coast Guard, and our nation. Thank you to the Navy League for the invitation to participate today with my distinguished colleagues up here. It's an honor for me to be here to represent the United States Coast Guard. As Dr. McCready said in her introduction, I am the commander of the U.S. Coast Guard Pacific area. For those who are not familiar with the area, I like to describe it like this. From polar bears to penguins, you might have heard this before, from Hollywood to Bollywood and a little bit more. So that's the region. It's pretty vast. It's 74 million square miles of ocean in over 70 countries. My counterpart, who's the commander of the U.S. Coast Guard Atlantic area, he covers the remaining part of the world. I say this to illustrate that we are a global Coast Guard, and I think that's especially important for today's panel. As I answered Dr. McCready's first question, I asked that you, the audience, ponder a simple yet not so easily answered question of my own. And I've seen this time and time again. And the question is simply, where is the western coast of the United States? Where is it? Just think about that as we go and we have these discussions. Now, Dr. McCready, to your first question, from my perspective, the challenges in protecting U.S. interests across the Pacific Island chains, while all of these islands have unique geography, environments, different names, unique people. The challenges are no different than anywhere else across my AOR, or for that matter, I'll say across the globe. The challenges can be summed up in two words that we Coast Guard Sentinels hold pretty dearly. The two words that describe our distinct, and are also the same two words that describe our distinct value proposition to the rules-based international order. And those two words are very simple, but really complex. They're maritime governance. That is a challenge that I see. I think of maritime governance. When I say maritime governance, I think in terms of search and rescue, in terms of fisheries enforcement, in terms of maritime law enforcement, marine environmental protection, humanitarian assistance and disaster response, maritime security, and facilitating maritime commerce and trade. So I think of all those things wrapped up into two words, maritime governance. Those also happen to just be the enduring missions of your United States Coast Guard. So it makes sense. In fact, every day to promote maritime governance across the island chains and around the globe, Coast Guard Sentinels with ships or aircraft, or perhaps small teams of subject matter experts, combine enduring maritime presence and expertise with niche missions and authorities. Take protein security as an example, protein security or fisheries. Arguably the lifeblood and an existential issue for many Pacific Island nations. The U.S. Coast Guard maintains and leverages more than a dozen bilateral law enforcement agreements with our partners to counter illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing on the high seas, and more importantly, in their sovereign waters. In fact, as I'm speaking right now, the Coast Guard cutter Harriet Lane is returning from their historic inaugural patrol or deployment as the Coast Guard's first Indo-Pacific support cutter, our dedicated cutter to the region. And they have just finished that throughout Oceania, where their crews leverage those law enforcement agreements to protect our partners and our partners' national resources. This brings me to another important point that I think has to be made, particularly so for this specific question. Coast Guard, I'll describe it as an overt, pragmatic service with the humanitarian ethos. So we do not target specific actors or specific flag states. Rather, we target malign behaviors or activities. Simple way to put it, violations, not nations. Violations, not nations. Like stopping the maritime flow of illicit narcotics. Last December, the Coast Guard cutter Weishi offloaded 8,000 kilograms of cocaine worth $240 million. And that was on top of the nearly $1 billion in cocaine our Coast Guard removed from the Eastern Pacific in fiscal year 23 alone. Or last fall, when the Coast Guard cutters Kimball and Bertov met presence with presence when a PRC Russian surface action group operated in and around the Alaskan and Arctic waters. Or last year, when the Coast Guard cutter Stratton conducted a highly successful Taiwan Strait transit with, according to the Pacific Fleet commander at the time, they handled the approaching PRC Coast Guard vessels in an exemplary manner that I think became the example for others as those things happen. Bottom line is, with our unique capabilities and authorities, we remain committed to ensuring maritime governance in the island chains, domestically and across the world, so that our nation remains safe, secure, and prosperous. Thank you for that question, and I look forward to the further questions you may have. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Admiral Ruttenberg.
All right, well, aloha. You guys have to go to Hawaii more often, so aloha.
Aloha.
All right. Hey, so on behalf of Admiral Kaler, the new commander of U.S. Pacific Fleet, it's my honor to be here. Dr. McGrady, thanks for the invitation to be here. Not a day goes by in the Pacific Fleet where all of our four organizations aren't working together in that maritime environment. So first, a quick introduction. I am the Reserve Deputy Commander at U.S. Pacific Fleet, responsible for how the reserves are organized, how we train, and how we prepare to be mobilized in support of U.S. Pacific Fleet. As a full-time reservist out there, I'm also responsible to Admiral Kaler to ensure that we are evaluating new technologies, new maritime component capabilities in order for us to integrate across the force and across the Joint Task Force to be able to deploy new systems that will support our warfighters. Now, to get after the question about really about the challenges that we see in the Pacific. First is our challenge is not just to protect our U.S. assets only. It's really to look at 35 other maritime nations across the Pacific and how we work together to make sure that all of their interests are protected. And we share the same values, which is really to safeguard the international rules-based order, which we've had for nearly 100 years. And that's to share, when we share those values, it's really the foundation of peace, prosperity, and the stability that we've all enjoyed. Now, alongside with our allies and partners, we're also committed to upholding the free and open Indo-Pacific region, where all nations, regardless of their size, are secure in their sovereignty, can pursue economic opportunities, resolve disputes without being coerced, and lastly, to have the ability to freedom to freely navigate, whether over the maritime surface or in the air, really in alignment with international law. Now, as I think we heard CNO say, we've already said that here, we are certainly in a strategic competition. General Bierman said, not shying away. It is the PRC as our pacing challenge in the Pacific. When we look at, in that region, 60% of the world's economy comes in and out of the Pacific. We have 7 of the 10 largest militaries in the Pacific. every day is a time for us to be in conflict. And it's only thanks to great leaders across the force, whether it's Coast Guard, Marine, Air Force, Army, the cyber folks, it's that ability to withhold certain capabilities to make sure that we do not go to war, to continue that deterrence. Our ability to actually have the upper hand, which we have today because we have the world's greatest fighting force, is really to be able to see, understand, decide, and act faster than the adversary. You asked about the challenges that we see every day, and I think it really comes, for us, it comes down to three. One is the size of the AOR. When we talked about you're going from penguins to polar bears and from the west coast to California all the way to India, it's the sheer size. And with that also becomes the environment and how we have to deal with that changing environment and how we move forces around the Pacific. And so that becomes a significant challenge. And as we move into some unmanned systems and try to show where that technology can take us, it's the ability to move unmanned systems without having to be a person on the loop to be able to go around storms or around weather in order to maintain those systems. The second one, again, because of the size of the AOR, is our logistics chain. The ability to sustain and maintain, whether it's ships, submarines, aircraft, fuel that we depend on the MSC to provide, all of those become another significant challenge for us, again, because of the size of the AOR. And then lastly is our ability to do command and control. And it has to be resilient, it has to be redundant, it has to be there all the time, 24 hours, 7 days a week. And so we have to look at how we communicate across both our HF traditional, I'll say lower data rate architectures, as well as our space architectures, and the amount of investment we've seen in P-LEO and how that drives our ability to communicate, not only to submarines and to our strike group commanders, but to be able to also pull data from sensors that we'll talk about through Saildrone and other systems, how we pull that data back so that we can actually see the data, make decisions, and act upon them.
Thank you, Admiral. Admiral Carey.
All right, thank you, Dr. Grady. Good morning, everyone. Great to be up here on the stage with fellow service members, business partners, to talk to you a little bit about this important region. So I'm the Deputy Director for Operations, so I oversee our 15 research ships, our 10 research aircraft, and some of you may have never heard of the NOAA Commissioned Officer Corps. We've been around since 1917. There's several of us here today and through the week, so I encourage you to stop and talk to someone if you haven't heard about our service and learn a little bit more. Vice Admiral Tongson, whatever you call the West Coast, there's plenty of atmospheric oceans in this region for us to stay fully employed. So let me just talk a little bit about our challenges first, and then talk into some of the actions we're taking there as a result. So challenges, infrastructure is definitely a huge challenge in this vast region. There was a time when we had 3 ships that were fully operational out of Honolulu supporting the Pacific. The first one went offline in around 2012. Didn't get replaced. Second one went offline in 2018. We're replacing it in 2025, so not a great story in terms of observation, continuity, capability there. The third ship is probably going to go offline late 2028, something like that, and we're working hard to get our shipbuilding program to be able to keep it a vessel constructed to replace it in a timely manner, but also looking at some observational gaps on that front as well. So that's a huge challenge for such a large region, and I'll talk a little bit more about how we've mitigated that. The other challenge there is keeping up with peer structures in that region. You definitely have to have those things in place to be able to operate, have that presence there, and thank goodness they built things really well during the World War II era, so we can continue to operate and use that today, but there is going to come a time we're going to have to renovate and modernize there. So definitely working hard to make sure we can continue to provide the products and services to this really, really important region. So NOAA, we're all about the sciences, and in this region, we support fisheries, mapping and charting, ecosystem, oceanography, And we use those skills and tools not just for the United States, but also for our partners out there. There's been some pretty significant spill events. One was in Sri Lanka, it was a plastic spill, another one in the Philippines, and basically NOAA can help. We can help with the data, show where the contaminants are going, what's the ocean modeling saying about where they're going to go, how are you going to contain that, and then work closely, whether it's with the Coast Guard or local authorities there as well, to help those countries deal with large-scale situations. We're partnering closely with Palau. This is under the direction of the Biden administration, helping them understand what's going on out there beyond the reef. You know, they need to have that information, that data, to be able to make good decisions for what they do with their valuable, precious natural resources that are so much a way of their life in that region. When a NOAA ship is in a region out there where a country calls and says, hey, you know, we need some data on our ports, we'd like to bring some bigger ships in, or maybe we'd like to build a pier, or maybe our defense partners would like to do a landing on one of the beaches, we can go in just a few days, we can map almost that entire country, because they're pretty small in a lot of those places, get their data on a chart and help them to make decisions that can really boost their economies, boost their safety, and help with their livelihood there. So there's a lot we can do in a little with the short turnaround. We are heavily leaning into uncrewed systems. A lot of that is in great partnership with our friends from Saildrone, as well as other companies as well, like Liquid Robotics, sending systems out where there are data gaps, where there's observation gaps, where it may make more sense to send one of those systems, and really leaning into using that emerging technology and seeing some really exciting results as we continue to add more and more into that region. We'll continue to place a huge emphasis on what we're doing for living marine resources. Tuna in this region is what oil is to the Middle East, and so it's really important that we know where the tuna are spawning, how many are out there, how the catches are impacting that, how the changing climate is affecting those ecosystems, and again, help with the livelihood from those nations. So definitely leaning in there. And then continuing to provide as many climate products and services as we can as countries try and evolve and get ready to adapt with that emerging threat and how that's changing them. And I'm super excited to share that we actually have a climate component in an upcoming war game in that region, which I don't think has been done before. So really excited to be part of the game in the Indo-Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. And finally, Richard Jenkins.
Thank you. First of all, what an honor and privilege it is to be on the stage with four great leaders as the only civilian here, so it's a great privilege. So thank you for the opportunity here. I'm the founder and CEO at Saildrone, where we manufacture and deploy unmanned or long-endurance unmanned surface vehicles. A lot of the work in the Pacific. In fact, we've been working in the Pacific for the last 10 years, I think, maybe with NOAA and colleagues, both on the Equatorial and Western Pacific, deploying most out of Guam and Hawaii. One of the biggest challenges for us has really been the vastness and the remoteness of the area. That means that you need a lot of assets to cover this area, and those assets have to be very reliable. I should say at the start, I'm going to talk mainly about the unmanned applications within the Pacific rather than the greater challenges here. Due to the recent successes in Ukraine with cheap explosive USVs, I'm seeing a lot of rush towards kinetics when talking about USV systems. However, while there's certainly need for kinetics both as a deterrent and during a conflict, I think we should not overlook the many data gathering applications that are essential for both civilian and military operations in the region. At Saildrone, we have chosen to focus on unarmed, persistent presence for ISR data gathering to support existing urgent requirements for our partners, NOAA, Coast Guard, Navy, Marine Corps, and our partner nations in the area also. As an example, scientific monitoring in the Equatorial Pacific is crucial to understand global weather events like El Nino. We've been working with NOAA since 2016 in the Equatorial Pacific with METOC-equipped voyages to collect oceanographic and atmospheric measurements. METOC is often overlooked as a product, but as our weather patterns continually change and change more rapidly, and understanding the environment and the accurate weather forecasts will play an important role in preparing for any future conflict. The region is also used extensively for illegal and unregulated fishing, as well as trafficking illegal drugs and weapons. Only a persistent presence can we monitor patterns of life to detect and track illegal activity. Long-endurance unmanned systems are the ideal tool to do this. Lastly, we should not forget the subsurface threats and the vital role that submarines will play in any future conflict. Preparing complete and accurate maps of the sea floor, for example, are not only essential for the safe navigation of our surface fleet, but will be crucial for submarine fleet in any potential conflict. I think unmanned systems have a big role to play across the region by data gathering and intelligence gathering at low cost and low risk.
Very good. Thank you very much. So we're going to go through a round of very specific questions to each one of our panelists. And I'm hoping we'll keep this within time so that the audience can begin to ask its questions. And as a reminder, there's a microphone up there, so you'll have to make your way up there. I'm going to direct this first question to Admiral Ruttenberg. Admiral, how do we operate unmanned, or how will we operate unmanned systems given the challenges identified by your earlier comments and your fellow panel members?
Well, it's a great question, and I think first one, we've demonstrated we can deploy unmanned systems through what we called integrated battle problem. Departed San Diego, went across the Pacific, Hawaii to Japan, down to Australia, back to Guam, and then back to San Diego to complete a complete deployment of our unmanned systems. And operated those in collaboration with manned systems. All of that worked actually very seamlessly, and we were able to sustain and get parts out ahead of those unmanned systems, which was important for us to be able to replace parts as they failed, knowing when things would fail. So I think that we've already demonstrated that how we can deploy them. The other part that we're trying to do is, and I think it's in the panel next door, is where Admiral Small is talking about overmatch and the ability to upgrade and update software continuously. So in the same way that we look at automation of cars and how we're updating software overnight, we're doing the same thing for unmanned systems and how we're going to patch those to keep them secure. And then I think lastly, it's when we want to evaluate them. It's how we model and simulate what they can do for us in the environment, how we put them into experimentation, and then finally our exercises and how we integrate all those across the force, because they do provide capability across the Joint Task Force in order for us to close kill chains. It gives us unbelievable access to data that we can't do with manned systems. And so our unmanned systems actually reduce the risk to manpower. We can put machines in places where we don't need to put human beings and put them at risk. So it's a great opportunity for us to already be out there on the forefront.
Very good. Thank you. Since we are talking about unmanned systems, if I could direct the next question to Mr. Jenkins. There are many companies, including the ones that Admiral Ruttenberg mentioned, who are entering the unmanned system space to help enable the nation's maritime forces. So what are the challenges you've seen that unmanned system providers have to deal with?
Yes, I'm delighted to hear your experiences are similar to ours. So everyone thinks it's about buying the vehicle, obtaining the vehicle. For us, it's just 20% of the problem, the challenge. Once you have the vehicle, then your challenges begin. It's resupply, the sustainment. It's fine doing one vehicle for one day, but when you do tens or hundreds year round in very remote parts of the world's oceans, then the logistics, the sustainment, the refueling, the services, the supply chain, that really becomes the kind of the largest part. And certainly for our company, where we offer a full service kind of a COCO model, where we deploy them, own them, and operate them, I see our operations side of the company being 80% of the company, and only 20% being the R&D and actual vehicle manufacture, due to the challenges you say. So I guess my words of warning for the other, of which there are now very, very many unmanned system manufacturers, is don't underestimate the learnings and the work you get once you start deploying these systems. We've deployed for over 1.3 million miles, about 37,000 days deployed in the open ocean, and every day we learn new lessons. Things we didn't expect, that broke, okay, we'll fix that. So those are lessons you just can't buy, so it's a very long tail of O&M and fixtures. And I think when we buy systems, and it's not just our systems, there are multiple, there's underwater, there's surface, there's aerial, it's a systems approach that we need, but every system will have its own learnings, and the kind of the expense of the long tail of maintenance will probably overshadow the procurement of those devices.
Great, thank you. General Bierman, you mentioned allies and partners in your previous answer, and so how do you see your presence in the region and your relationships with allies and partners contributing to deterrence? We haven't talked very much about deterrence, so if you could give a few insights on that, that would be great. Thank you.
No, Doctor, thanks for the question. And some terrific comments on systems and equipment, and I appreciate a similar amount of time on the people and relationships. We like to say in the Marine Corps, people first and systems always. But to the question, presence matters. And in that part of the world, in the U.S. Joint Force, with allies and partners, it's all about relationships. I talked in my earlier comments about the fact that, in 7th Fleet and 3MEF, but across all of our military services, the Joint Force, we have our people living and operating forward in the first island chain on the Korean Peninsula, and I think that's profoundly important. That's skin in the game. Maybe you could say, to a certain degree, that's the shared hazard of living and operating in the weapons engagement zone. A lot of precedent for that in the American military. We did it for decades in Western Europe. We're doing it on the Korean Peninsula, and we're doing it in the first island chain. But that contributes, make no mistake, to the relationship. Nothing fosters tightness like a shared fighting whole. I will tell you all, and not because I'm Pollyannish or because I wish it was the case, but my experience as a commander in the Fleet Marine Force for the last 3.5 years in the Western Pacific is our allies and partners are all in. They are feeling the heat. They're tired of getting pushed around in their own backyards. We are doing things in terms of access, in terms of bilateral, trilateral, multilateral exercise. We are doing things we couldn't have imagined doing just a short time ago, just several years ago. We could talk about, what are those systems, what are those weapons, pieces of equipment that most catch adversaries' attention: 5th-gen fighters, subs, long-range rockets and munition carriers, all true. But what I would say emphatically is nothing sends a message of deterrence and unsettles our adversaries like true interoperability, like the direct evidence of the U.S. Joint Force operating closely side by side, grinding and developing interoperability and capabilities with allies and partners. That is unsettling. And then the last point I'll make on this is under the pressure of the threat in the Western Pacific, with limited time and resources, that operational dynamic within the U.S. Joint Force with allies and partners, it has made us very purposeful and focused. I would say even ruthlessly efficient. There's no more untethered, unhinged, theater security cooperation. The exercises, the operations we're doing, everything we walk back from an existing war plan. It is a rehearsal of an existing war plan with the actual joint partners, allies and partners we will operate and fight with more often than not on the terrain from which we'll operate at the specific high-risk times of the year. That's campaigning, that's forward posture, and I think the deterrence message is being received. Thanks, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Admiral Tiongson, what do you see, since we've been talking about the region, and you had a very eloquent way of talking about the expanse of that region, I was curious as we, as the General did, begin to look within the region itself on some specific areas. What do you see as the challenges in protecting U.S. interests across the Pacific Island chains?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Doctor. I think I mentioned that in general in the last time we talked. I see it as maritime governance. And just as General Behrman was talking about, presence matters. Presence definitely matters. When you're trying to become a trusted partner throughout that region, you have to be there. Not only do you have to be there, but you have to see the threats and challenges through the eyes of your partner. You have to meet them where they are with what they want. And that's what we try to do. We try to do that in many different ways that you probably wouldn't even think about, but it gets us to that point where we are a trusted partner in the region. Let me give you a great example very quickly here. There was an oil tanker that sank off of one of the pristine islands of the Philippine Islands. It went down and had about 260,000 gallons of fuel oil on board. And that was hurting them in terms of tourism. It was hurting them because of fisheries, which they use for sustainment or subsistence. Think of protein security. All these things. A small team of 5 U.S. Coast Guard subject matter experts went there in terms of marine environmental response. And not only were they there, but we brought in our Korea Coast Guard partners, we brought in the Japan Coast Guard partners, and all of this unified command structure now, run by a Coast Guard commander, was basically there assisting the Philippine Coast Guard in their response. A trusted partner, being there, seeing the threats and challenges through their eyes, present, being there in knowing what their need is, and then providing that need. And it helps out a great deal. It helps out a great deal when we sit at the table all together and talk about regional maritime security. Because now folks know they can rely upon us to be there. So very much, it's a people thing, it's a relationship piece, and we want to be there for that.
Nice, thank you. Admiral Carey, given that you are from one of the U.S.'s premier science agencies, and you have what is NOAA's role in collecting environmental intelligence in the Indo-Pacific, and how is your work changing with the rise of China in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. And I think first and foremost, we're going to continue to do what we've been doing for a long time, which is to be a trusted leader with environmental scientific information. And how do we evolve, with that as threats change and as the geopolitics change? We're gonna continue to see what the requirements are that are out there that need to get met. Our Hurricane Hunter aircraft, they're equipped with the tail Doppler radar. When they fly through a hurricane in the Atlantic, the forecast for intensity improves by 20%. The forecast for the track improves by 20% just from those aircraft flying through. You've probably heard of the typhoons. They call them typhoons in the Pacific. There's been some pretty serious storms that have made landfall in Alaska, serious storms that have made landfall in the Philippines, many other countries. If those types of systems are going to continue to heat up, we need to absolutely make sure that the countries out there that are working to be equipped for those are ready, as well as with our U.S. counterparts that are serving in that region. So that's a really important capability. It's about sharing data. It's about getting the data. It's about making sure those products are available to their public so they can make the decisions they need to take actions in a timely manner to save lives. The Pacific region out there, about 24% of it is mapped. Again, that's good business for NOAA. That means that there's a lot of work left to be done out there to make sure that the countries, both the ones that we're close partners with and the one that are still deciding if they want to be our close partners, we can help collect information that can make their ports more lucrative. They can make better resource decisions, and they know that if they're working with NOAA on data collection, that it comes from a calibrated instrument, an expert operating the equipment, and the data is going to be reliable and ready for their use when they're ready to put it in towards applications. So we're going to continue to do what we've been doing and just evolve to meet the demand and requirements as those evolve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Admiral. I think that's a really good statistic, 24%. It's not a lot. All right, it's your turn to ask questions, and you need to walk up to the mic. So I'm gonna, hopefully somebody will be brave. Thank you.
Good morning. Todd South from the Marine Corps Times. I had a question for Lieutenant General Leary. You spoke about partners. I was wondering if you could talk specifically about the Marine Corps
Yeah, hey, thank you for the question. We have now stood up 2 Marine littoral regiments in 3MEF and in the Marine Corps, and they are set against key naval terrain, decisive areas, working very closely with the fleet, with the joint force and allies and partners. One thing I would say that's very interesting that's occurring right now in the Western Pacific is the things we're doing to evolve toward Marine littoral regiments that operate across distributed naval terrain in multiple domains. That is being copied across the board in the Western Pacific by the South Koreans, by the Japanese, by the Taiwans, by the Filipinos. But I think it is the capability we need as we walk back from our war plans against adversaries in the People's Republic of China. But I would also emphasize that success in a conflict or deterring a conflict is going to come down to a combination of Marine littoral regiments, and then I would say in some cases more traditional formations, still highly capable, and we have both of those resident in the MEF and in Marine forces in the Western Pacific. I hope that gets after some of the questions. Glad to talk to you afterward about it.
All right, next question from the audience.
Yes, good morning. Thank you all for your time. Eric Lees from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Mine's more of a general question because it touches on all of your AORs, but given the Chinese presence with infrastructure projects, port development, and all of that, how does that impact your ability to maintain that presence on the ground and the security information-wise and counter-espionage on your operations, pulling the ports, and the collaboration is so vital to maintaining those relationships? Thank you.
So who'd like to be first to answer that question since it was general?
I'll try to get after that one a little bit. It's okay. So yes, that's a problem throughout the region. There's no denying it. There absolutely isn't. The question in my mind that comes up about that is can all of that be trusted? And that gets me back to the statement I made earlier about being a trusted partner. Always meeting our partners where they are with what they need, and always seeing the threats and challenges through their eyes. And that's why presence is key. Episodic presence isn't going to get us there. We have to be persistent. I mentioned some of the persistent presence that a little bit earlier in terms of the Coast Guard cutter Harriet Lane that was on its inaugural patrol as an Indo-Pacific support cutter. That is there. We have another one that's in our unfunded priorities list that we went ahead and added 2 additional what we call fast response cutters to the ones that we have out in Guam already to increase that presence, with 2 more in that same list. We are trying to get as much presence as we can to always be there and so we can be counted on. And what I have seen in many of the different multilateral types of organizations that the Coast Guard is a member of, North Pacific Coast Guard Forum, the Pequod, Southeast Asia Maritime Law Enforcement Initiative, RECAP is another one for piracy. We're in a lot of these things. And what do all these partners talk about? How they need help for maritime governance. Because although there may be these development programs and things that are going on, there's also the other side that's happening. And the other side is, hey, well, we're not going to let you go ahead and take care of what your waters are. No, those are our waters, by the way, that's our island, those types of things. Or we're coming and we've got the largest distant water fishing fleet around. Yeah, we don't care, we're going to take everything out of there. Folks are asking for that help, and that's why presence matters, and that's why being a trusted partner matters. Thanks.
Anybody else like to take a crack at it?
Only very briefly,
Please.
we do a lot of work in contested areas. We're not allowed to either the shore is too dangerous to go to for security reasons, or it's just not allowed. And the beauty of a long endurance unmanned system is you can transit a long way to get there. So we often transit 2,000 or 3,000 miles or more, then do a 3 to 6 month loiter mission and sail back. So if you're not relying on fuel and people don't want to stay at sea for 8 months, we're getting great use of unmanned systems to operate in those remote places where you can't get access from remote ports.
All right. A third question from the audience.
Morning, Lieutenant Colonel Christopher John. I'm a China Foreign Area Officer. About 5 years ago, this month, I was attending our defense attaché office in the Federated States of Micronesia. So I was very happy the last couple of months to see the COVA finally get funded after a lot of fits and starts. And I know, Councilman, your kind of answer just sort of preempted my question a little bit, but I was hoping some of the panel, and specifically the Marine Corps and the could comment on what we're doing to help leverage those relationships and some of the neglected parts of the South Pacific, places like Kiribati, Tuvalu, and the Solomon Islands, where the Chinese are making a lot of very impressive improvements.
General, do you want to go first?
Sure, and then I'll turn it over to Andy. Without going country to country, and in the interest of time, what I will say is occurring in the Western Pacific, pretty exciting for me as a Marine, you know, in a place where the Naval Service and the Marine Corps made its reputation. But recently, based off of the security, the economic importance of the region, we have been transitioning in the Marine Corps within what we call Marine Forces Pacific from one assigned Marine Expeditionary Force to two. So those things that were previously done primarily or exclusively by 3MEF, we are now dividing responsibility between 3MEF, which is forward deployed west of the international date line, and 1MEF, which is headquartered in Southern California. So to the great point, and there are so many allies and partners that are of critical importance, we've got more Marines throwing elbows, campaigning and operating day to day than we've ever had before. And I think you get some variation of that theme as you go through all the services, Andy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chip. I really appreciate that question. I don't know where you ran off to because I posed a question in my answer to the doctor's question, Dr. McGrady's question earlier, is where's the western coast of the United States? I want to just quickly pick up on that because what doesn't happen when I ask that in different venues, some people, yeah, they get Hawaii, they get Alaska, but they don't get our territories, like the CNMI, the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, Guam, America Samoa, and then you just mentioned the COFA states. So the Federated States of Micronesia, Republic of the Marshall Islands, and Palau. All those places we have security relationships with a great deal. And if you look at all that and you push those things out and you look at their exclusive economic zones, all of a sudden you get a bigger picture of where the west coast of the United States really is. So I'm in the business of homeland security. Do we care about those smaller nations that you just mentioned? The answer is absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. And I mentioned that Indo-Pacific support cutter and how it was operating in and around the Oceania region. And now the next deployment, it will get to other ones of those small nation islands that are throughout there. And then what was eye-opening to me, and I think most people understand here, is I had a chance to travel to the Pacific Islands Forum with our ambassador to the United Nations. And she reminded me, we were talking to a country that has about a population of 15,000. I think ours is what, 430 million or so, or something like that. And I was sitting there going, wow, that's pretty small. And she goes, yeah, small, but guess what? That 15,000 people, they have the same vote that I have in the United Nations. One. Is it important to be a trusted partner? Is it important to be with those small nations that you just mentioned? Yeah, from her perspective, absolutely. And I'll just offer this. As we were going around talking to everybody, who do you think came in the doors next? Yeah, it was the PRC delegation that was there. It was like global competition happening firsthand as things were going on. So do we have to get out there? The answer is yes. I mentioned 2 fast response cutters that are going into Guam. That's exactly why they're going in there now. And there'll be 5 total. Again, we're trying to get another 2. One will go to Hawaii, another one would go to Guam. That would be 6 of our vessels that could get out to those islands in many ways, and then a second Indo-Pacific support cutter. So we are trying to have that presence to be that trusted partner. Thank you.
To add on to that, and for, again, presence in that part of the globe, we've wrapped up Pacific Partnership. We've been out there since November. We're getting ready to go again, bring the Mercy out. We've had doctors and dentists out there. We've had our CBs out there building clinics, building roofs for their schoolhouses. Again, it's the presence. And as you mentioned, right behind us comes the PRC. But when you ask the countries about their willingness to engage with us, what they ask for is a partnership and who they can trust. And that trust is extremely important to them. And they time and time again say, look, we need the money from PRC. But at the end of the day, we trust the United States of America. The presence we have, what we do day in and day out. We bring 160,000 people out of poverty around the world every day because of where we are, when we visit, and what we do for those countries. And that's where they see our value added. And again, it's the presence that we have there across the Pacific.
Thank you. Oh, there you are. One more question. I think this is our last question.
Okay, I'm Eric Bethlehem with a venture capital firm called Mark Aaron. This may be a difficult question, but I guess what I'm trying to understand is, what are we solving for, right? Are we solving for climate change? Are we solving for bringing people out of poverty? Or are we solving to fighting in wars? And I guess the elephant in the room is that the PRC it's unclear. Are they an adversary? Are they a competitor? Are they an enemy? And so from a first principles perspective, we'd like to hear what are we solving for and what is our desired end state? Thank you.
I would venture to say we're probably solving for all of the above, but I would be happy to have, does anyone want to go first on that question? Remember, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure, I'll take a stab at this one. So the PRC is an adversary primarily because of the challenge that they provide to prosperity of not only the United States, but other countries around the Pacific. We're not forcing any of these countries to make a bilateral deal with the United States in the same way that China does. If you look at the espionage that the PRC does, it's not necessarily against US government capabilities. What they're doing is they're stealing from companies that are trying to, that you're funding, venture capital, here in the United States. You're looking for that 1 in 20 company to break a deal so that you can be profitable. Yet at the same time, China is hacking into the same companies that you're investing in. There's companies downstairs that can show us the data of how much money is being invested by China venture capital into US companies, with the whole purpose of siphoning off intellectual property that US companies and companies that are from Australia, the UK, our allies and partners, and trying to get after that same technology. So it's not just our goal is to deter war. The last thing that any of us want up here is to actually go to war. So we try to deter that every day. But again, you have to, your question focused on where are we focused. And as a venture capitalist, I think you have to look at your intellectual property and what you're losing, the billions of dollars that you lose or US industry loses every day to cyber espionage.
You looked like you were about to say something, Admiral Townsend. Do you want to take a stab?
I'm always willing to say something. Am I still there?
Yeah.
Still there. That's a great question. And what happens in our case, because of all of those various mission sets that we have and authorities we have, we do get involved in a lot of different types of things. But again, I come to the very fundamental piece of meeting our partners where they are, what they need, and seeing the threats and challenges through their eyes. Some of those countries that we talked about, the biggest thing for them is climate change, without a doubt. The gentleman who asked the other question talked about Kiribati. Well, Kiribati had a drought just about a year and a half ago, a big drought. United States Coast Guard, USAID, what are we doing? We're providing water back and forth. We're involved in that stuff. Many of these countries talk about sea level rise. They're low-lying nations that are small. They're worried about sea level rise. And what else are they worried about? Mass migration. So we consult them on how do we handle humanitarian assistance issues, and we talk to them about how we handle migration patterns and those types of things. And I already talked about the oil spill in the Philippines, and then certainly the fishery stocks. A lot of these countries depend upon fish for their subsistence as well as their economy. They need help because some of them don't have a constabulary organization or a military that can go out and do fisheries. And that's why we have a lot of those bilateral agreements that enable us to go ahead and look after their sovereign resources through them. So it's across the board in many different ways. All of it, and I mentioned this earlier, all of it to get after violations, not nations. But I'm not going to kid everybody. We know who the biggest violator is in terms of IUU fish, without a doubt. If that's one way that they're breaking the rules-based order, then we have to try to correct that. Violations, not necessarily nations, but we have to get after those things. Thank you.
I would just say very simply, I'm a Marine. I mean, my knuckles drag and spark when I walk. It's an area, the Pacific, Indo-Pacific, of profound importance, not just the United States and its allies, but to the economic and security interests of the whole world. And I fall back, on the conditions the United States and its allies have set over the last 75 years for maximum benefit, not just to our allies and partners, but to the entire region and the entire world. We want to perpetuate and maintain that and make sure that we send a strong message to would-be adversaries that area belongs to everyone, and we're going to continue to make sure that everyone's able to benefit from it. Thanks.
Thank you. So we've officially not only run out of time, but we're a little bit over. So let me close by saying this session was about the challenges of protecting U.S. national and economic security in the Indo-Pacific region. And a few of the points, not all of them that were mentioned today, are integration with others in the area across this panel. You can see there's a lot of integration there. Being there now as opposed to when, in case something happens, developing that trust and those relationships, and with 35 other nations developing relationships, meeting our partners where they are now. Also, it's not just about the systems, it's also about the operational aspect and learning lessons. And last but not least, it's about data, which I think is something to carry forward. So with that, I'd like to thank the panelists, and I'd like you to join me in thanking the panelists.